the Cult of Hockey podcast by the faith. Oh, let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm Bruce McCurdy of the Edmonton Journal's Cult of Hockey, and I'm here with my colleague Kurt Leavins tonight. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, Bruce. It was so great to see you in person a couple of weeks ago, and here we are watching Oilers games again. So,
yeah, it's just coming up. Yeah, I hadn't seen either of you guys for a long time, and it's kind of fun to get together for a quick cup of coffee there and just catch up in person a little bit. So,
I had to smile at David's comment. He said, "Of course, I forgot to take a picture again. There's never any proof that the three of us are in the same place at the same time."
It does happen, but too rarely.
Yes.
So, anyway, what also is happening is hockey. We're finally back, and when last we had a podcast, which was now over a week ago, so we're overdue, and David is out of the country, so he's been unavailable he can't even log in to write posts, so he's been out of the loop for a while. So there was no way we could undertake doing podcasts after every game, but we're prepared to make an exception for the first game, but also maybe make some more general comments and just simply focus on one preseason game, which tonight Edmonton Oilers opened the preseason with a 4-0 shutout. I was going to say beat down, but I don't think that's fair to the Jets. The Oilers shut out the Jets 4-0 with one very, very early goal and 3 late ones, and a whole lot of fairly competitive, decent hockey in between times, mostly played by second-tier players and tweeners and what I sometimes call scrubs, or training camp extras. That may have a role in the distant future, but probably don't right away. But not much sign of the Stars tonight, Kurt.
No. I thought it was a pretty decent hockey game, considering A, the lineup, and B, the fact it was the first preseason game of the year. Usually there's scrambly affairs from minute 1 to minute 60, and there certainly were scrambly moments. It certainly wasn't a perfect hockey game, but pretty entertaining. And I agree with you. I don't think it was a beatdown. I think the Jets kept it pretty close until late in the third period. Certainly thought the Oilers had the more skilled of the two teams on the ice. But I think we can certainly say that when both of their regular rosters will be on the ice as well. Right. So it's kind of fun to get to, to see some of the depth guys and some of the guys that are battling for roster spots, because after all, early on in training camp, that's what it's all about. We're just kind of chatting about whether we'll see, Connor and Leon and Darnell tomorrow in Seattle. And I think we're guessing probably not, right? Why put them through that flight where I think they're flying out to Seattle day of and then flying right back out after the game. So they probably won't get back to Edmonton till, even if the flight's on time, probably 3:30 in the morning. So why do that to your Stars at the start of what's hopefully going to be a long season? So yeah, it was not a bad hockey game, and we got to see a lot of these bubble players that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks and trying to surmise whether or not these guys can find a roster spot or not.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this is that time of year where, much as we love watching Connor and Leon and the boys put on a show and rack up the points, they really don't have a lot of motivation to be pouring on their best games in September. Whereas you have these guys that are on the cusp of the roster, their time is now, and their every opportunity is a time to shine if they can.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind. Like I pointed out in my introduction of my game review, that the top 10 Oilers by salary cap all sat this game out. And so they, but those guys, I also pointed out that those guys all have a lock on the roster.
Yeah.
And so that means that at most there were 10 spots left available in the opening night roster for the 20 guys who played tonight. And I think we can probably pencil a few more names off of tonight's list into that final roster, not least of them being Stuart Skinner, who got to start in net tonight and played a pretty solid game for 35 minutes, making 19 saves with no goals against, and looking pretty sharp, I thought, in the process.
Did he not? I know it's a preseason game, so it doesn't count. But is that not back-to-back Oilers shutouts for Skinner? Because did he not have a shutout on his shut in his last game before he got sent down to Bakersfield?
He has not been scored on since Jay Woodcroft became head coach.
There you go.
Maybe I should use him a little more.
yeah. I thought he looked really sharp tonight, like maybe one of the best Oilers. And there was a while from about the 10-minute mark of the first period to a few minutes into the second period where I thought the Jets held the balance of play.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was probably Skinner and some good work by the penalty killers that kept it 1-0 at that point.
Yeah, well, Oilers definitely had the better goaltending in this game, both Skinner and Calvin Picard, while Winnipeg went with the erratic David Rittick for the entire 60 minutes, and he made a few good stops, but boy, did he look brutal on a couple of the goals against.
Big game Dave didn't have a big game.
Big save Dave, yeah.
Big save Dave,
he made a few saves, but I'm not sure any of them were big ones.
Well, he'd probably want that first one back, and while I really love Ryan McLeod's speed on his goal, that was a miscalculation. Maybe a miscalculation of McLeod's speed, but nonetheless, it was a mistake. So.
McLeod's speed beat the goalie to the puck. Usually your speed's going to beat a defender or something, or you can get around and get in. But Rittick thought he could actually come out and intercept the pass and play the puck out. And McLeod got to it before he did. And Rittick basically took himself right out of the play in the process.
Whoops.
yeah. McLeod looked good, man. He's so fast, and he seemed right from the start, I thought, wanting to, just impose his game on the game. And his game is carrying the puck.
Yes, and transporting through the neutral zone and forechecking, and he can just flat out fly, can't he?
Yeah, and he's big and fast. I thought his passing was maybe a little bit off the mark, but his puck handling was really good. He made a couple of really nice one-on-one moves. So he got that goal. And he was on the de facto first line, which really was the only true NHL line the Oilers dressed tonight, with himself at center, leading the forwards in ice time, I believe, at just under 20 minutes, with Warren Foegele and Jesse Puljujarvi on his wings. And many people would envision that as a third line. When they're all ready to roll.
Yeah, you know what? I think if Nugent Hopkins ends up in the top six, there's a pretty good chance that will be the third line. At least that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Although it was interesting, they were talking about Foegele getting a shot on the right side in training camp, but the first preseason game, there he is back on the left side. So, but I mean, a lot of that's just a function of training camp lineups, right? So
right, and they had one of their top right wingers in the lineup, and really no left wingers. So, there was no Kane, no Hyman, no Nuge. So there was a big gap on left wing. So Foegele was obviously qualified to go into that spot. On that line of McLeod with Foegele and Puljujarvi, my thought was that of the three of them, Puljujarvi had a fairly weak opening game. Yeah. And a little disappointing. I mean, you look at his boxcars, no goals, 1 assist, +2, and you say, what's not to like? But I also see no shots, no hits, no takeaways. And I thought a lot of problem clearing his own zone, which normally isn't a problem for him. So whether he's playing his way into it's just sort of the first game and he'll be better. He sure needs to be after that showing.
I didn't think he was particularly assertive in the offensive zone, but what caught my eye was a couple of cases where he lost battles along the wall and didn't get the puck out, which I'm not used to seeing to him. Jesse, while I don't buy into this, he's the Oilers' best defensive player, but I do think he's very sound defensively, particularly in his own end. So those were uncharacteristic mistakes of him, and maybe it's just a case of him shaking off some rust.
Yeah, I think he's a sound defensive player in the offensive zone too, which is one of Jay Woodcroft's. When he talks about how he wants his team to play defense, that was the first thing on his list. is attacking the puck in the offensive zone, which to
Yeah.
me, well, as a fan of Jesse Puljujärvi, I thought, well, that's a positive sign because he'll see that as a real strength of Jesse's game. And some observers, think defense is something that only happens at your own end of the ice when
Not at
really
all,
it happens by winning puck battles wherever that puck happens to be, and
for sure.
not getting yourself out of position in the process.
I
Anyway,
thought I thought Fogel started a little slow, maybe, but I thought he came on as the game went on,
mhm,
and got a nice primary assist on the McLeod goal. And by the end of the game, I thought, okay, that's Warren Fogel, right? There's going to be a certain amount of guys playing their way into these games, particularly the veterans who
yeah, well, they
arguably
have.
don't have a whole lot at stake, right?
Yeah, well, the thing about this time of year is the very widely different priorities from
Mm.
one player to the next, right? In regular season game, they're all focused and giving their best. At this time of year, some guys, well, they know they got the team made. They're maybe working on one particular thing or another. Maybe they're trying one new skill. They're getting, a chance on the penalty kill or, something. Uh, but I mean, Leon Draisaitl, for instance, what he does on September 25th is going to have 0.00 bearing on what
Mhm.
kind of season he's going to have. Whereas, given that kind of ice time, let's move on to some of the guys who did get to play tonight because the big guys were out. And we might as well, we've already buried the lead because I'm doing the podcast and that's how it often works out. The lead from this game, and I think from camp as a whole so far, including the Penticton rookie tournament, is the splendid performance to this point of Dylan Holloway,
Yeah,
who
I thought
shone in this game and was
he
first
sure
star
did.
with a bullet.
Yeah, I thought he was the best player on the ice on either team from the very first shift. I think I
Yep.
think I put a tweet out 2 minutes in going, looks like Dylan Holloway wants to stay. But he didn't let up, man, and he played in all different situations as well. 5-on-5, he was on
Yep.
the power play, he was on the penalty kill.
Yep.
He took at least one draw that I saw.
Yep. Two draws, one
Um,
and one.
yeah, so it looked like Jay Woodcroft was saying, okay, let's see what you can do. And I think Holloway. One thing I love about Holloway, he has that boyish look of wonder on his face. Like here I am in an NHL training camp. He looks thrilled to be there, and he played like that tonight. And all of his tools were on display, and you can't help but think that the Oilers brass and some of the regular players who weren't dressed tonight probably said, "Huh, think he could probably help us."
Hmm. I want that guy on my line.
Hmm.
So, of all the players that the Oilers have had over the long, long term, I followed the team since the start. The one sort of comparison player that keeps coming up to me when I'm watching Dylan Holloway, which I'm still learning his game, so this is a very crude sort of first impression, but he reminds me of Esa Tikkanen.
What an
And
interesting comparison.
just his complete game, his compete, his ability to play on, like both sides of special teams, as you point out. Tonight he played 311 on the power play, 240 on penalty kill. And again, some of the regulars weren't there, but he looked just fine in both of those roles. But it's
Mm-hmm.
more just his puck hounding and his quickness and his ability to create turnovers just by being aggressive around the puck and having a good stick and pretty good anticipation skills and pretty good wheels. When you put those things together and if you've got a guy that's paying attention out there, you can have a pretty sharp defensive player. And I'm fairly confident that he's going to bring that. I have a very, very high degree of confidence that this is going to be a roster player who will help the team at some level, either at wing or at center, top six or bottom six. He's got such a wide range of skills, as my friend Lowtide likes to say, that there's room for him. He's the kind of player you'd like to clone and put him in more than one spot. When he gets up to full speed. But he strikes me as he's going to be one of those players where you say, well, geez, I would like to have him on this line and that line. How do we do
Yeah,
that?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing I found tonight, well, it's really easy to fall in love with his offensive play, and he was on his horse. I mean, that was all very entertaining. But if he is to make this team, I thought the key moments were his turns on the penalty kill. Because if this kid can make the hockey team, he's not going to be in Edmonton to play 6-7 minutes a night.
Right.
He's going to have to play on one of the special teams.
Right.
And on this Oilers hockey team, he's not going to be on the power play for the first couple of years. Those slots are filled, right? He'll be lucky if he gets a look on the second team.
Yeah.
But he is a real smart player. He anticipates really well, has a good stick, and moves extremely well. All of those aspects help make a good penalty killer. And I think he only really started killing penalties in Bakersfield last winter. And now, granted, that wasn't against a full NHL roster tonight, but he looked right at home in that role. If he can be on one of your penalty kill units, well, suddenly there's a possibility he could play, 10, 12 minutes a night instead of 6, 7. Well, now you can talk about whether or not this guy should stay in Edmonton or not. And so I'll be interested to see if he can maintain that defensive prowess going forward, because it may be key to whether or not he can crack the roster.
Well, there certainly was a lot of positive talk about his performance in Penticton, where he was repeatedly referred to as the best player on the Oilers, and the Oilers clearly were the best team in the tournament with a 3-0 record with 3 solid regulation wins, the last 2 of them by 3 goals. And of course, the Oilers did have more, I think, depth of certainly first-round draft talent, but Holloway was the guy, to me, who led the way, and he did that again tonight. So there's plenty of reason to be excited about this guy, even if he's just showing flashes for down the road. But everything I see now, he's dead set on making this team now.
Yeah, looks that way to me too. I mean, we'll see how it pans out, right? But he sure seems like he's got a plan. So.
Yeah, why wait till spring? Do it now. It used to be an old ad slogan way back in the day.
So, I mean, there was all kinds of talk about this guy before he got invited to camp. What did you think of Bertana tonight?
So like he was. I mean, you could see that he's an experienced player. He was fairly physical along the walls. He was in decent shooting position. Like he had 5 shot attempts, and I described him as being from the perimeter of home plate. Like they were sort of in the grade B scoring chance zone, but he only hit the net with 1 of those shots. Like he kept on his best chance. He definitely fired wide on that. But that's just 1 game, tiny sample. He's going to make his case. And I'm not convinced that he's going to move the needle much, but and frankly, I'm surprised that the Oilers are the team that decided to take a chance on him after his legal woes. But here we are, and I mean, our job at the Cult of Hockey is to judge how he plays on the ice. And tonight, I thought nothing special, but not terrible. He was all right. What do you think?
Yeah, well, what I like about him being in camp, and I alluded to this in my 9 Things column on Sunday, is I like there being another actual NHL player there for other players to have to beat out for a spot.
Right. Okay.
I tend to think he's a long shot to make the roster, but kind of like Demers on the back end, I like having veterans like that your younger guys have to beat out. I think that's a really good situation. I think winning organizations are often in that situation. I thought he was okay tonight. I think I saw his game pretty closely to the way you saw it. I thought that whole line was decent, but I thought a lot of that had to do with Holloway was just terrific. And I thought Brad Malone delivered what Brad Malone pretty much does every time he hits the ice, which is nothing flashy, but he's sure solid and consistent, and was again tonight. So,
Yeah, well, Brad Malone, he's another guy. They had several, had an assist and +2. Uh, he earned an assist on the game winner in the first minute of play with a decent pass into good ice.
Mhm.
And I think he was trying to hit a forward, and it wound up going back to Niemelainen, who of all people opened the scoring. Uh, but he had 3 shots on net himself. He had 7 hits in this game. He was scrumming it up a little bit. When anybody got close to the goalie, he would be pushing them out of the way, just showing that kind of veteran physicality and team first leadership that he's renowned for, frankly, in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And the question about him to me is his boots. And he just, he's not that fast of a skater, but he does the right thing a lot of the time. Decent on the face-off dot,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't hurt his cause tonight. And he is in to me a pitched battle between him and Greg Mccague to make the roster by the at least the one template of how they're barely going to get under the salary cap. There's room for exactly one of those guys, and
Yeah.
they both have basically the identical cost contract. There's no financial advantage. They both have 2 years at league minimum, so 762,000. So because when you're literally talking about hundreds of dollars under the
Yeah.
ceiling, every little bit counts. But these two guys are tied for salary, so it's just simply going to come down to which guy wins the job. And McCage's been an NHLer for a while, and Malone's been an NHLer on and off for a longer while.
Yeah.
And only one of them is apt to make the team, but there
Yeah.
probably is room for one of them. Where if you just said completely on merit, and there was no salary cap, they'd probably both be on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
But Malone, I think Malone definitely helped his cause tonight. It's not like Jay Woodcroft doesn't know what he can do, but he's
Well,
just another example of that.
I was just going to say that, right? I think all things being equal, even if Malone and Mccague end up playing about the same quality in training camp, uh, Malone is a brand that Jay Woodcroft knows and trusts, and I have to think that if everything else is equal, I think that might put him over the top if all that plays out the way you're describing, and I think it may well. So.
Right on. So up front, who else caught your eye in tonight's game?
Tyler Benson did.
Mm-hmm.
He looks quicker than he did last year. And now maybe it's because he was playing, against a team that was 50% AHL players. But you know what? Maybe he put in additional work in the offseason and came to camp a little bit quicker. But I mean, all the things, and I glanced at your game report shortly before we came on, and it was excellent as always. But I agreed with your observation on Benson. All of the telltale things about Benson were there. Gets his nose dirty, not afraid to be physical. Will show up on the scrums. Is a real sees the ice well. Is a really good playmaker. But we've seen all that before.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw tonight, which I haven't seen much of, as Tyler Benson's tried to become a regular NHLer, is quicker boots. I don't mean to say he's Ryan McLeod fast. He's not. He
Right.
never will be. But he was getting around the ice pretty good tonight. And I thought, well, good on you, kid. It's I think a lot of people in the Edmonton area in particular are cheering for this guy. And I think his odds are a lot longer than they were last year. But I thought he had a pretty good showing tonight. But it was his foot speed that caught my eye.
Yeah, I thought first step, like a couple times, like the puck came in his general direction and he was gone with it
Yeah.
in the right direction, and taking advantage of um, open ice and getting there to it as quick as his boots would allow, and then trying to set up plays from there. So that part was encouraging. I love the one scrum that he was in where he was wearing this just big greasy grin the entire time,
And he
and
got
looking
poked
like
a couple times and just
looking
took it,
like the
right?
victim getting poked, and then he got a
Yeah.
poke in of his own that nobody saw coming up and underneath the
Yeah.
linesman, I think. And
I
so
saw that one. Yeah.
it was nothing more than a little backhand slap or what have you, but it was kind of funny. I'm a fan of the 20th century enough that I don't mind the occasional scrum and bit of
Yep.
greasy play. And Benson, to his credit, he's really added that. He knows that if he's going to make it, he's going to need to bring every edge that he's got. And if he's an edgy guy and he doesn't mind pissing off opponents, well, you might as well bring that strength. And he did last year in his big effort, and I think that we saw it again tonight.
Yeah, we all know how good it is to have a player on your team that other people don't like to play against. So it's an attribute he can bring. What about you? Was there another forward out there tonight that caught your eye in a particular way?
Well, I got a bit of a man crush on this guy. I got to admit, James Hamlin. Man, I like that guy. Now, I've seen him in Bakersfield play a number of games, and I saw him in rookie camp, and I saw him tonight, and he just seems to be around the puck all the time. And he's in the what the football players would call the strong side, where he is. The puck seems to be, and he's involved in the play. He's got some decent defensive skills, where he's. And this is what's going to make or break him. And he himself knows it. For all that he was a very good scorer in junior hockey and was a third in the WHL in scoring his final year, he knows that his road to the NHL is bottom six. And bottom six means ideally you're good on draws. You can kill penalties. You don't get beat in your own zone. And, every once in a while, like he's made a couple of strong defensive plays, not just no mistakes, but actually plays that in the rookie tournament. I was impressed a couple of times on that score. And tonight he had one really good chance on a backhand shot that was saved. He had one where he just missed it. There was a really good pass from Benson, and he just missed tapping it on the far side. And then finally, he scored the 2-0 goal when he jumped on the rebound off of Jason Demers' drive, and the goal. It was a good shot, and the goalie had no choice almost but to kick out a rebound into the slot. He just hammered it in. There was no chance for Riddick to get over and make that second save. And it's a guy who has a half decent. Goal scoring ability. He had 21 goals in Oklahoma City last night. He had 2 in Penticton. He had 1 tonight. Not sure that he's a playmaker. I'm not sure that he's got enough of all these things to ever be an NHLer, but I will say that I've seen enough to know that whatever level he eventually finds, he will be a good pro at that level.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same with him.
Low end NHL.
Yeah. I just think, Edmonton's, they're pretty deep at center. They've got these guys. Connor, Leon, and Ryan were pretty good centermen. It's
and Ryan.
But you know what? But if injuries crop up, the word is out that the organization does like him and they think he's got a shot, right? But I'm with you. It's he does a lot of things pretty good. I'm not sure if he does anything great. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, he can play wing as well. In fact, that's where he's been lining up at camp. So that's they're trying to make him as versatile as they can. I mean, that's one thing about the Oilers. They got a whole ton of guys that can play both center and wing.
Yes.
So you never know who's going to get hurt. But if you call up a replacement guy who can also do those things, then that's in his favor. And Hamlin tonight, he was the top penalty killer on the Oilers for ice time. And this on a unit that went 4 for 4. So. Yep. And he had a couple of block shots in that effort as well. So, just one last young guy, Reed Shafer, played his first professional game. Beyond rookie camp, like a preseason first game is often all a kid gets in his first year, and it may be all that Reed Shafer gets. And I think he learned a few things tonight, and. High on that list is things that he's going to need to work on when he goes back to junior hockey in the relatively near future. And I'm guessing that he may be on that flight to Seattle tomorrow and possibly even staying there because, of course, that's where he plays, Seattle Thunderbirds. And I'd be happy to see the team give him a second game already tomorrow night in his home city, where he plays. And then say, great work. All along you've been locked to have your, be slid back to junior for your final year. Might as well get going because they're already playing league games. And so.
I'm with you. I thought he had some good moments. one particular example where he took a hit along the wall in his own zone to get a puck out, which I thought was, I saw that in rookie camp as well. It's nice to see him do that against pros, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I suspect he discovered what a lot of rookies discover when they show up at an NHL training camp. They probably look around and go, wow, this is faster than I even thought it would be. And this wasn't with all the good guys on the ice. So I suspect what he'll be working on over the next year of his career is getting those legs churning. I think there's a player there. He has lots of good attributes. Right now, this game's too fast for him.
Mm-hmm.
But at just turned 19, that's no crime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is certainly, that's something he can overcome with, you know, with training and dedication, all that kind of good stuff. But the experience will be invaluable. And, you know, he was in practice, he was often on the McDavid group, which that's a good guy to hang around. So he'll chalk it up to a good experience, I'm sure. But I think we saw the same performance tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, promising guy. Like, he's big. He's 6'3", 214.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a great shot when he's got time to let it go. Like, he's got a very heavy shot from the slot, and he's no stranger to crowding the crease either. So there's lots to like about his game, but it's probably going to take him a while to put the pieces together. And I mean, he already made huge strides. I mean, last year he scored his first, was it 32 goals he got in junior? Trying to remember, 20, maybe it was 26 goals and 32 assists. Anyway, he never had a single goal before last year. And by the end, he was a power forward for Seattle in the WHL finals.
Yeah, I had a couple of people who watched that series who said he was Seattle's best player in that series. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, he was very noticeable.
Yeah,
and of course 32 overall, very end of the first round. It's going to take those guys a little bit longer as a general rule. You don't usually find a guy there that's ready to make the jump.
Yeah, this was all about experience for him, and he's getting that, and that's great. And you can look forward to seeing him at camp again next fall. So,
right on. Okay, let's turn to the D, and I know you had a general observation on Evan Bouchard. I want to hear more.
Yeah, he looks stronger. Maybe it's just me, but it looks like he's got more core strength than he has had before. He just looked stronger and a little more able to impose his will against other players. I'm not trying to make him out to be, you know, Adam Larson reincarnated, but he's always been big enough to play more that way. But sometimes it's those last 4 or 5 pounds of muscle that make the difference between pushing and being pushed. And it just felt like he was doing more of the pushing tonight. And given all of his other really impressive tools, if he can add that to his defensive game, that's a very good thing indeed, because he was already a plus with the puck. And so, I mean, this one game, who knows? But it struck me tonight, just like I thought, oh, Benson looks faster. With Bouchard, you know, Bouchard looks stronger. And he's also just a younger guy who's a year older, which is, as we all know, is going to make a difference too. So I thought he played a good game. That shot that went in off Holloway and in was you know, the Bouch bomb that everybody loves to see.
As well.
He did those great hard, you know, like either right along the ice or an inch or two off the ice. They're just perfect deflection shots, but they're hard enough and accurate enough he can score with them. But yeah, his just a little bit of oomph in his game, which I was very happy to see.
How'd you like the looks of the new pairing with Kulak?
You know, funny, Kulak was exactly who I thought he would be. He was more or less the guy that I watched in the playoffs last year. He's not the perfect player, but you know what? He has the boots that when there is a mistake or if he starts a half stride behind, he can make that up. He's that good of a skater.
Yes.
And so I really enjoy watching him. I think he's a wonderful skater, and I really enjoy him watching him get around the ice. He and Bouchard together, not bad. I'm not sure if that's a pairing that we'll see. I think it's possible. But on this night, And you know what? There's a lot of wingspan there too between those two guys. You know, it's that's a lot of arms and legs and sticks that can get in lanes, and you don't have to be, you know, Rod Langway to be effective defensively. And some of those physical tools that both of those guys possess will certainly help them.
Yeah, well, good sticks are helpful on the defensive side of the puck as well, and I think that's Bouchard's big strength defensively.
Mm-hmm.
It's his stick, but Kulak, he has some things in common with Keith in terms of his mobility, and of course Keith was Bouchard's partner for the line
Yeah.
share last year. Well, one thing Kulak's very different from Keith is he defends his blue line way stronger. Keith would tend to give you the line and back into the zone, and Kulak is he likes to break that rush up right at the line, and I think it's kind of his zone is along the blue line and just inside of Edmonton's blue line is where he likes to contest and win battles. And we'll see whether he's got what it takes to do that a little higher up. Like last year, he was basically third pairing, and this year it looks like he's projecting to the second. But he's just at that point in his career where if he's ever going to make that move, why not now? You know,
Mm-hmm.
just turned 28, and he's got the the experience now. He's still a relatively young guy, and now he's got the opportunity, and see what he does with it.
Well, I think your observation on him is really smart. You know, a lot of defensemen like him tend to defend their own zone the way Keith does because they have speed. They're confident that they rarely will get beat to the outside, and they use that to their advantage. With him, it seems a little bit different. He uses his speed to close fast on attackers.
Yes.
High in that zone, right? And I think that's what you're describing. He uses his speed in a different way, but I agree with you. There is a different end result often, and it's usually his guy pinned up against the boards and not able to do too much with the puck. So yeah. Funny, I'm just laughing because we were talking about the forwards and we got a little ways in before we thought we buried the lead with the forwards. I wonder if we did the same thing with the defensemen tonight.
Well, yeah, Marcus Niemelainen, I guess you're probably referring to him, and he had a pretty strong game. He was the second star of tonight's game behind only Dylan Holloway. I was originally going to name 3 game stars in my post, and I'd confidently picked out Dylan Holloway, Marcus Niemelainen, and Stuart Skinner.
Right.
And then I looked at the actual game summary, and it lists the 3 stars, and guess what? Dylan Holloway, Marcus Niemelainen, and Stuart Skinner. So I guess it was obvious.
Well, there you go.
Probably not worth changing our format for something that just underscores what I mean. I think it was fairly obvious to everyone watching that game that those guys were all having a good night.
Yeah.
And Niemelainen, 15 minutes. He had the one shot early in the 41 seconds into the game, and somehow I think it might have hit the shin pad, or the one angle made it look like it might have hit the shin pad of the defender.
Oh,
and then
okay.
Wicked in past the goalie, because otherwise you got to wonder how did David Riddick let that one in. But I think it was going wide and it clipped the defender on the shin pad. But he was more forced defensively with 6 hits, 3 block shots, and just some generally aggressive play. He really lit up a couple of guys with open ice hits, which is always going to be his strength. But
yeah, I was going to say several of those 6 hits were of the thumping variety. Yeah,
that's a specialty for sure. And again,
well, he just brings a dimension that really no other defenseman in the organization has. Right? Yeah. It's he every time I see him, and I think he looks a little more confident with the puck this year. I don't think he'll ever be, Evan Bouchard or Tyson Barrie with the puck. But if you can at least, get a really good, consistent first pass and help, get your team headed out of the zone, for a defender like that, that's probably all you need out of him.
Yeah. Then we had the 2 vets, Jason Demers and Ryan Murray, that both played tonight, and they both showed their vetness. And with just some of the little tricks that they pull, calmness with the puck, or I noticed with Jason Demers, that when he had a guy hot on his tail, he was pretty good at doing the head shake, even when the guy was coming at him, from behind, and sort of making the guy zig while he zagged and came out with the puck, even just for a half second, that he at least could make a play with it without the other guy stick right on the puck. Uh, of the two, I personally thought Demers was the more noticeable in a good way in this game.
So did I. So did I. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, you know what? I was watching both guys. I thought both guys had moments where I thought their relative lack of speed, if I could put it that way, exposed them a little bit. I'm not really surprised. They're bubble NHL defenders for a reason at this
right.
point in their career, right? So that's okay. I didn't think Murray had a great game. I thought he was just okay. But there were times where I thought Demers, I thought, boy, that's an NHL defender who can move the puck pretty well, right? And I thought he showed pretty decently. And it's funny. I was thinking about this earlier today, kind of anticipating that both these guys would probably be in the lineup tonight.
Right.
And it wasn't that long ago that you'd see a guy like Fane come into camp and play,
Right.
top 4 minutes on the Oilers. Well, now these guys are Fane-esque, if you will, but they're battling for the 7 and 8 positions, which is kind of what you want from a Fane-esque player. So I didn't mind either of their games from the standpoint of, in both cases, we're talking almost certainly about depth guys.
Right.
Probably only one of the two of them are going to make the team.
Right.
Given Demers' history with Jay Woodcroft, I wonder if they offer him an AHL deal and keep him in the organization. He seems mighty appreciative of being given the chance.
Mm-hmm.
And given, one, the relative lack of depth on right defense, and throw in the fact that that the Sea Monster has a little bit of an injury right now, Desharnais.
Right.
Having a right-hand shot like Demers around for the first couple months of the season in the organization and available might not be such a bad thing. So, I mean, one game in, but they both look like, you can tell both were NHL defenders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's kind of dripping off of both of them, that they've been here before. It's not their first rodeo, as the saying goes.
Yeah. I didn't
So,
think Dmitry Samorukov had a great game, but I hasten to add, but he played the right side all night.
mm-hmm.
He played his weak side, and having tried to do that when I played, I can tell you it isn't very easy, especially against pros. And so I had time for his game tonight. It's thought he was in a bit of a difficult position playing his offside. I thought he did okay. He made one particularly nice play in the slot where he got in the way of a puck that was coming across. Thought he did a
Mm-hmm.
very good job there. There's a guy that I do not think is going to make this team, and he's going to have to clear waivers.
And there's a good chance he doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, given the way he performed tonight, he was more than okay. So yeah.
Yeah, well, he's played the right side basically the full season that he was in the KHL. With he was playing with a fairly fellow lefty, Klaus Dahlbeck, with Central Red Army, and Dahlbeck played his natural side, and Samorkov played on the opposite right side, and he was fairly effective there. And tonight, I thought early there was a couple of outlet passes that it probably didn't help him that his stick was away from the boards,
Yep.
and but then later there was a couple of plays where he passed the puck into the interior of the ice. There was a great pass he fed to Holloway, who
Mm-hmm.
was hopping through the neutral zone, and Samorkov hit him just perfect time and weight that Holloway didn't have to slow it down at all. And in fact, he wound up basically getting a breakaway on that play because he got the puck with such time and space that he was able to really ramp it up and take it wide on the D-man and cut in and almost beat the goalie and draw a penalty. Like, it was a super play by Holloway, but it was made possible by that beauty outlet pass. And I know the coaches are looking for little details like that, but the other detail they're looking for is, can you do it consistently, play
Mm.
after play? And if you can make that pass over and over again, there's probably a spot for you in the National Hockey League. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, it's crowded on the Oilers' defense, and that's a nice
right.
problem to have.
Mhm.
So a decent showing tonight. He'll have, as to your point, he'll have to do that a couple more times because
Yeah.
by my count, he's got at least a couple of other players to beat out for him to be
Right.
on the opening night lineup. So
Yeah. Well, there's no reason for, especially if he can play right side. There's no reason why he shouldn't get 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 preseason games out of the 8. Because, as you say, the Sea Monster is down and out. They only have 3 right shot defensemen on the roster proper, and one of those is Cody Cece, who hasn't even been on the ice yet since camp started. So
I
he won't
hear
be
he. By
playing
the
any
way,
games.
I hear he skated this morning. By the
Oh,
way,
good. Okay, good.
yeah, yeah.
But there's no
But I
reason to rush him back into games.
100% agree. Yeah.
No, if he plays the last exhibition game or the last 2, that's probably plenty.
Yeah,
So in the
and with
meantime,
yeah, and to your point with Samorukov, if you risk losing him on waivers anyway, you'd better find out now what you got.
yeah,
Right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So he had some good moments tonight. So what? Let's turn the page on tonight because, as mentioned up front, we only saw 20 of the 52 names that there are in camp, of which I think as many as 6 have been hurt. Uh, and I don't think we really need to say anything about the 10 guys with the big contracts because we know they're all going to be there. I mean, I got nothing to add on Connor and Leon that we didn't know in June. Uh, but of what we've seen in rookie camp and what we've heard from the beginning of main camp, and what we've been able to pick up by whatever means. I know you've got your sources, Kurt. Uh, who from the guys that didn't play tonight has the most interesting story to tell? And more than
Well,
one is fine.
yeah. Well, I'll maybe give you a forward and a defender.
Sure.
On forward, I mean, because there's a bunch of players battling for the last couple of forward positions,
Mhm.
according to me at least.
Right.
Um, and the one guy that's in that mix is Matthias Janmark.
Right.
Um, and while I've seen some people say, well, maybe he's a guy that they'll end up waiving, I have a hard time imagining that.
Mm-hmm.
They went out and signed him
Mm-hmm.
as a free agent. It would be highly
Right.
unusual to then turn around and
Yep.
waive him. And I think a guy like that would get picked up.
Yeah.
Really inexpensive contract, good, useful, reliable NHL player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm really interested to see him play in the preseason to see how he does stack up with those other guys on the roster that are going to be battling for positions. How will he look vis-a-vis Derek Ryan?
Yeah.
How will he look vis-a-vis Jake Virtanen? How will he look, probably more to the point, versus Devon Shore?
Mm-hmm.
I think those are probably a handful of players that are after those last couple of jobs. You mentioned Brad Malone. We'll toss him
Yep.
in there too. So Janmark's the one guy that I've kind of got my eye on. There's actually 2 young defensemen who, one has caught my eye and the other one, I'm told, has caught the eyes of the organization. The guy that caught my eye in rookie camp is Max Wanner.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, and he looked sharp in every rookie game that he played. So I'm kind of keen to see where he ends up. I think he's going to get signed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've not seen this guy play except for a couple of highlights yet, but according to people who have watched him play, apparently Alex Peters is having a very good showing at the rink these days. This was a guy. He kind of reminds me. I'm trying to think of the young defenseman that we drafted, and then we lost, and he went to Pittsburgh, and he ended up turning into a pretty good NHL player. Who am I thinking of? Just can't
John
think of his name.
Marino.
John Marino. This is kind of the reverse of that, where Alex Peters was a Dallas
Mm-hmm.
draft pick, 3rd round draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's come around and he's a camp invite for the Oilers. This guy has a few attributes, including the fact that he's 6'4", and while he's listed at 220, apparently he may be even a little beefier than that. Gets around really good for a big man. Was 22 points in 29 games in Wichita last year.
Which
This
is Oilers farm team in the ECHL.
Yeah. So this is a guy that's
on the Oilers roster here. They say Wichita AHL.
In the AHL, yeah. Last I checked, Wichita isn't in the AHL.
So it's 2 leagues below the NHL.
Yeah.
He's on an AHL contract, Peters?
I don't think he's on a camp invite. I don't think he has an AHL contract yet. That's what I think he might get. Right. Not that the Oilers don't have room for a few NHL contracts. They do. But I'd be surprised if at this point they would sign Alex Peters to an NHL contract. They've had a little bit of success signing guys to AHL deals and say, go out and earn yourself an NHL deal. Well, it's basically what happened with Malone. Right. Yeah. Signed an AHL deal and then ended up with the NHL deal. So those are the two or three names that I've kind of hearing things about and am watching for over the next week. How about you?
Yeah, DeHarnay and Hamlin did the same thing. That year ago, they were on AHL contracts, and then during the year they played so darn well that the team decided, this is a decent bet, and this was the actual strategy of Keith Gretzky, that they wanted to when they sign guys to AHL deals, not to sort of consign them to the scrap heap of all these are AHL guys, that's all they're ever going to be, but to actually try and develop them and be aware when things started going right that let's make a move. And I think those were good signings. I mean, the chances of them making the NHL long term probably aren't that great, but I think it's a nice culture to develop that. You come in, AHL deal, you're going to get a shot, man, and you play your, you keep working your way up and improving, and we'll give you a shot. I mean, just getting an NHL contract is a shot in the arm at the very least.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to be in an organization where you get rewarded?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that at the bottom line, I think that's what they're doing. Right. So you come in, see how you do. Okay. You've played well. Okay. Here you are. And I think that's probably what we'll see in the lineup in Seattle tomorrow is we'll probably see a few players who have had good camps or maybe even played good tonight, who they say, okay, you're getting another game. You've earned another try. Go out there again and see what you can do, right? Because that does seem to be the culture that they're trying to cultivate here.
Right on. Well, the guy's of interest to me, and this is a guy I must shamefacedly admit I know almost nothing about. Greg Mccague, who played, I think he's got 82 games, exactly one season's worth of NHL games in his career. But I believe all of them are in the Eastern Conference. And I'm not sure I ever saw a game where he was a player. It's certainly any more than a bit player. I mean, he only plays in the past, he's like a 10-minute a night guy. But because I know nothing about the guy, I'm interested to see him play and see, why did they sign him? Like, that was a signing that to me came completely out of left field. It came on the first day of free agency, as I recall.
Yeah.
And, the guy had 2 goals and 3 assists last year playing for New York Rangers. That doesn't sound that great, but
although
what else he's got.
I'm with you. Although it's funny when I heard about the signing, I thought, geez, that was a pretty good Rangers hockey team. So I automatically thought, well, then maybe there's something there, and that's probably the depth of analysis that I've got on the guy too, Bruce. Right. But he is kind of that. Who is that masked man, right? What is he going to be when he shows up? I'll be surprised if he doesn't play tomorrow night. And while we're at it, I think it's pretty likely Derek Ryan might play tomorrow night too. So,
well, last year in the Seattle game, the 2 kind of veterans that went to Seattle on this day trip that the veterans really hate, where Derek Ryan and Kyler Yamamoto
Yeah.
both come from Washington State.
Yeah.
So I suspect you'll see Derek Ryan, and he'll be playing for keeps too, because I mean, he's the one that's, you talk about Matthias Janmark. Well, those are two guys with identical contracts, and by at least one scenario that's plausible. There's room for one of the two on the team, and they're quite different players. I mean, they're both sort of bottom sixers of utility, but Ryan has got the advantage of being a right-hand stick who can play center and be a positive in the face-off circle.
Yes.
Janmark used to play center, and I think one of the problems was he wasn't good at face-offs.
Yeah, he was kind of a 40%
But
guy, right?
and another lefty. So that's an advantage for Ryan. Now that's a player whose game we know pretty well at this point, but I suspect you're right. He'll probably play tomorrow. Maybe Janmark will too. I mean, guys that didn't play tonight, other than the big guys, I think you're going to see mostly different team tomorrow night. And so he's uh, uh, he's in a pitch battle for position. And you would have thought over the summer, now that guy's in solid for the second year of his contract. The way he played in the back half of last season, he was a pretty
Mm-hmm.
good player for Edmonton once they found the right spot for him in the lineup, and useful on the penalty kill and that besides. And on the back end, I'm going to default to Philip Broberg, who's uh, he's got it all to prove still. And the general feeling is that he's going to come in, make the team. There's a spot where Keith used to be. They move guys around a bit where he plays on the third pairing on his natural left side. And he certainly had a decent season in the AHL last year. And yet, when I watched the rookie games, I was pretty nonplussed, I got to say. I mean, he's big, he's fast. He's got those skills. I didn't really see very good games out of him, and I'm interested to see how he ramps it up against the better pros as the exhibition season wears on. I mean,
Yeah.
he projects as a player, but I just want to see
Yeah.
evidence that convinces me.
No, I hear you, and I don't disagree with you. I love his wheels, right?
Hmm.
He's boy, he is such a good skater. But it's funny, I was thinking about him while I was watching Marcus Niemelainen tonight,
Yeah,
and thinking to myself, Marcus Niemelainen is far from the perfect NHL player, but he has an impact,
yeah.
right? Not
Hmm.
just physically, but because of his physical play, I think everybody kind of has to have their head on a swivel
Hmm.
when he's on the ice, and
Hmm.
that's an aspect that, as we discussed before, he kind of brings that nobody else does.
Right.
Um, I think if there's another player on the roster who might beat out Philip Broberg for that third left defense position, I think it's possible it could be Niemelainen.
Hmm.
Because I don't think that that Ryan Murray is going to get better. I think he is who he is.
Right.
I think there's a very good chance Marcus Niemelainen will keep getting
Yeah.
better. Now,
Yeah.
I think it's quite possible that Broberg does too, right? So I agree. I think that left side will be fascinating to watch. I kind of agree with you. I don't think it's safe to say he's made the squad, even though he projects to. I think
Right.
there's a lot that could happen in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Now the thing about Broberg and Holloway both making the squad is this wrinkle in the rule book about ELC players on
Bonuses,
entry level contracts with bonuses, as most
right?
first round picks have, and that if they make the team out of camp and they get declared on the initial roster, those bonuses in effect get pushed off till next year, whatever they wind up paying them, and they only get their straight salary goes on against the salary cap. But if they get sent out before the year starts and then get called up during the year, they call up both the guy's salary and his maximum bonuses,
Mm-hmm.
which in the case of Philip Broberg is $850,000.
Yeah.
So that's a guy that if he makes the team out of camp, uh, he costs just over 850, and if he doesn't make the team out of camp and they call him up, basically his cap hit doubles.
Mm.
So that's why most scenarios have him making the team, and Holloway's. I mean, it's one scenario has Holloway making the team out of camp and then being sent down the next day, but because his bonuses then are vetted, so to speak, that he's when they do call him up later in the season, which is highly probable, both these guys will be on the team at some point during the year.
Yeah.
But if they have a huge extra burden against the salary cap, but the Oilers are, was it $1.50 away from the limit? You know, I mean, it's just so tight
Yeah, it's
that if
pocket
they
change.
possibly can, you want to get those bonuses out of the way for this season. Man,
So
it's
here's a question for you. I'm not a capologist. I do my best to keep up with it.
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, right. It's math, which has never been
Yeah.
my strength. I get all that. It makes perfect sense to me. I understand it. Is there a complication, given that the Oilers are so tight to the cap, that there's a pretty good chance they're only going to be able to carry 21 players?
Right.
Well, then how does it make it more difficult to basically just paper those two guys for a game to move away from the bonus structure and then move them down? Well, if you only got 21 players on your roster, you know, suddenly you're with those guys, you're down to 19, right? I'm just wondering how much of a complication that
you
causes.
call someone else up to take their place, but the trick is that if you're saving the guys with the bonuses on the entry-level contracts, well, these are the guys that were already waiver exempt. But what you're going to have to do to get down to 21, if you're keeping guys that are waiver exempt, is you're going to have to expose guys who aren't waiver exempt.
Yeah.
To pare your roster down. This is where a guy like Samorukov is in deep.
Yes.
But potentially, according to this one very credible model proposed by Hart Levine, and when I say credible, I say on Tuesday he was on Bob Stauffer's show, Oilers Now, predicting that Ryan McLeod would sign a one-year contract for $798,000. He did not say $800,000, which is what it seems like. It's just a rounding error, right? Well, no, it's not an error, because by the scenario that Hart proposed there, with that $798,000 contract on the roster, the Oilers would be something like $165 below the NHL salary cap ceiling. And so it's just that tight that if he was making 800 and not 798, there would be another player they wouldn't be able to have room for. They'd have to do it different. So they literally cut it as close as they could. But by doing so, that makes it fairly transparent that may well indeed be what they're looking at. I mean, it's possible that they still trade somebody during camp. And all summer we talked about the same four names: Jesse Puljujärvi, Kyle Yamamoto, Warren Foegele, and Tyson Barrie.
Yeah.
And basically the four guys that are between 2 and 5 million. Because all the other guys are 1.25 or less.
Yeah.
And there's just not enough savings to be had there. And then all the guys that are 5 million plus, 7 guys, they are locked to stay. Like there's no way they're moving on from any of those guys. I mean, they just signed most of them, and the ones they didn't just sign are Connor and Leon. I mean, they're not moving those guys. So there's just relatively few options. And that said, I really don't like the idea of going with the 21-man roster for any length of time, because you can't. I mean, guys get hurt, and you get you get a couple of injuries where the guy is day to day, but you have 2 guys that are day to day, and you've only got one guy in the press box. Well, now all of a sudden you're going into a game and you've only got 19 players. And after one game, my understanding is there's a wrinkle that you can fill an injured spot with a minor league guy as long as he's making 800,000 or less. So just almost basically rock minimum, bare minimum, or just a few dollars above the minimum. So you can kind of stop the bleeding, but it's so close. And unless the guy has like got a serious injury that you're going to put him on long-term injured reserve, you've got to still pay him, and he's still up against your cap. while he's on
Yeah.
short-term injured reserve. And, I mean, 2 injuries first week. I mean, you might not survive the first week without having a
Yeah.
couple guys banged up. So
I
it's not
share the same
sustainable.
I share the same concerns you do. I think the one saving grace in a very difficult situation is the fact that this team has a pretty good track record of going 11-7.
Yeah.
Right. A good track
Yeah.
record and a coach that's not the least bit hesitant to do it.
Two coaches.
And you have the roster that can pull it off. So I think that helps, but I'm with you. It's a pretty high wire that they're going to walk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're going 12-7 on your roster, and of course the two goalies, that's your 21-man roster. Well, that allows you, with all healthy, you have a choice between 12-6 or 11-7.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure who they have on the defense that they would say, okay, you're going to play left wing for a night
Yeah.
there, Struddy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who that guy is on this team. Like the D men play D,
Yeah.
and so, but 11-7 has been proven by Jay Woodcroft and Dave Manson to be a viable strategy that can work.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and of course, one of the main reasons it's viable is it just means you've got those three centers that are on the ice for an extra couple of minutes a game, and
right.
that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess where you'd run into problems again is if this happens around back-to-backs.
Yeah.
Because then that kind of that you can. I think you can run 11-7 one night, but would you do that in back-to-backs? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, and then you've also got this situation where Bakersfield is not exactly St. Albert to Edmonton. It's not like Calgary or Winnipeg or Montreal, where the farm team is, a short bus ride away, a taxi ride away.
Yeah.
They got to come across the border, lengthy flights. There's no direct flight, so there's no sort of quick turnaround on a emergency call up.
No, the
Of course,
silver
even
lining is that sounds like all the border restrictions will probably be gone, if not tomorrow morning, soon afterwards. But I'm with you. It's still the flight and the arrangements and all that stuff. Absolutely. So.
Yeah, and they have. I mean, even the teams, Calgary or Vancouver, what have you, when they're on the road, they're going to have the same kind of problem calling players up. But it's not like they're both practicing in the same building. Like most of the Edmonton's the only Canadian team. In fact, I think they're the only team in the entire league that has their main team in one country and their farm team in the other.
Yeah, I can't think of another one. You might be right.
So that's the cap roster situation by Hart. He had it boiled down to one of Malone or Mccague had to be on the team, and one of Janmark or Ryan had to be off the team, that there wasn't room for them. And I threw out the wrinkle that they could also potentially waive Warren Fogle rather than Janmark or Ryan, and only the same amount they can bury in the minors on these guys. Once you're above 1.125 million, that's all you can bury in the minors. So
right,
whichever guy they send down, they're saving $1.25 million against the cap, and they're likely replacing that guy with a $760,000 player like Malone just because it's so close.
Mm-hmm.
So they can really choose a different guy, and the thought being, well, nobody would probably take Fogle on waivers, or if they did, it actually solves the problem for Edmonton, and that it gives them cap space. Because if he gets claimed on waivers, all of a sudden that buried cap that they would carry for him would go away. His contract would be gone. Mm. So I think he's probably better than those guys. Whether he's 1.5 million better than those guys is a different question. And of course, when we're talking about salary cap, it's such a huge factor in today's NHL, and it's just become more and more so over the years of the cap era.
Well, I agree.
It's all in the margins. You can have a good hockey player at one price, but another price is a liability.
Yeah. Well, look at Jesse Puljujärvi. At his contract today, if he ends up in the bottom six, that contract's a bit of a problem. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's the same contract as Fogle, and he's a bottom six player who's getting paid at a a little bit out of that pay grade, and all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
people are going, well, we kind of like him as a player. I mean, the good news in all this, Kurt, that all of these guys are good hockey players. We're not talking about being stuck with a guy, James Neal.
Yeah.
For all that he had fine qualities, and there was a reason he was a highly paid player. By the time he came here, he was a $5.75 million player who the next year was an NHL minimum guy who got waived out of the league.
Yeah. 100%.
And so and what do you do with that? You're stuck with eating something, no matter whether you buy the guy out, whether you trade him and you retain, or whether you trade him and take cap back, whether you trade him with a bunch of sweeteners. The pact is a liability, and I'm just not. I mean, the Oilers are well paid, but at least the structure is top down. It makes sense.
Yep.
And
The best guys make the most money.
Mm-hmm. And
Yep.
there's no cases of somebody who's just grossly overpaid. I mean, they moved on from Cassian for that reason this summer, and they did cost him some sweeteners. And Fogle is kind of the next guy in that category, bottom six winger, so not really what we call a core 12 player. And so he's by $1.5 million, the highest paid player who's not core 12, unless there's some sort of wiggle room on what you think of Tyson Barrie, but
Yeah.
it's a I guess it's a nice problem to have.
I think it
Those are the
is,
guys. I
right?
mean,
I think it speaks
Fogle
to the
can help
quality of
another
your
club.
roster, right? Yeah, for sure.
Whereas James Neal, for instance, was a player who had gotten past the point where he
Yeah.
could be of much help,
Yeah.
and he had way bigger cap hit that was way out of line with
Mhm.
what he could deliver at that point.
Related or not, I don't have the stat sheet in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I saw both Fogle and Puljujarvi take PK shifts tonight.
You
I got that
did.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did. And I do have a stat sheet, and it was 28 seconds for Puljujarvi and a minute 16 for Fogle.
So a
So a
couple
little
for
bit. They
him
had
and
eight
one for
minutes on the
Yossi.
kill.
So yeah. So yeah. So
Had 8 minutes on the kill, and the young guys, Shafer, Borgo, Jake Chason, who I thought had an okay game,
yeah.
uh, Jake Virtanen, none of those guys played any time on the PK at all. But the rest of the guys seemed to get at least one or two or more shifts.
Yeah.
And with
I,
Holloway being the huge exception of the young guys, and Hamlin that play, they were on the sort of top two penalty kill units.
what did
So
Philp get for PK time?
Philp got 32 seconds, so just really one shift.
He wasn't bad tonight. I was watching him. I thought, when you see him, I thought he hunted pucks pretty well and created some chances. Plays uh, a pretty solid and smart hockey game. I don't see many big mistakes out of him. My big thought really wasn't so much his opportunity to make the hockey team. I don't think there's any chance. I think he's going to be in Bakersfield.
100%.
But you know what it does do? It sure speaks to the quality of the Golden Bears program. That a guy can go from that program to this.
Right.
I really think kudos to the guys that are running that university program there, because that's judging by the trajectory of this player, that's clearly a quality program.
Yeah, well, I did the write up on Philp in our summer prospects list, and when it came to finding a comparable, uh, I had to go all the way down the Oilers' alphabetical listing to Derek Ryan, as a guy who played for the University of Alberta, who, I mean, all those guys who do make it, 100% of them are late bloomers.
Yeah.
Because they're generally guys that go right through junior and even an overage year junior, and then they
Yes.
flip over to university hockey. And if they just keep getting better and better, then those are the few cream of the crop guys that get a chance. Well, Derek Ryan kept getting better and better. And guess what? He played in Europe for, I think it was 5 years after U of A, and then one full season in the AHL before he was NHL ready. And he just kept getting better right into his late 20s and early 30s.
Well,
Noah Phil, he's going to get that 1 year in the AHL. without the 5 years in Europe. So it's a tall ask,
Mm-hmm.
but he's big. He's got, a right shot. He's pretty good at stripping pucks, as you point out. He had
Yeah.
three takeaways in this game, one of them that resulted in a goal. And smart. He seems to be in good position. I don't know. He's got the boots,
Yeah.
but he's got some game for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree. Hey, before we call it a night, we
Hmm.
didn't plan this, but I thought it'd be fun to ask you anyway.
Go
Anyway,
for it.
like, because you're such a marvelous historian of the Oilers, dating back to their inception.
Thank you.
So the Oilers Hall of Fame,
Hmm.
which I'm a big proponent of, and I don't think
Yeah.
either one of us were surprised with Ryan Smith.
Nope.
And I think Lee Fogan was a great choice.
Nope.
If you were to pick one other player and one other builder to go in next year, off the top of your head, who would you pick?
Oh boy. Well, I'm yeah. I got a list of guys from each decade, that I think in the fullness of time will get considered and probably selected.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I said to David, he asked me a similar question before, but it was players, and I said Randy Gregg and Charlie Huddy, two stalwart defensemen from the '80s dynasties who each won 5 Stanley Cups in this town. So
Yep.
that floats their boat as far as I'm concerned. They're both real solid players, and I was a little surprised that Fogelin was picked. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
He deserves it. So those are kind of my default players, and my real dark horse uh, Hall of Fame player who probably won't get picked, but who I'd like to at least see them consider, is the great Norm Ullman,
Uh-huh.
who played for the Oilers, WHA Oilers, for 2 seasons in the 1970s at the very end of his stellar
Mm.
career, uh, where he played 20 NHL seasons and he played them for either Detroit Red Wings or Toronto Maple
For the
Leafs, and then he
Leafs, yeah.
signed here out of Toronto. But what I like about Ullman, and this is where the history part kicks in, is that he is the best candidate of guys who connect from the Oilers of any era, the WHA in this case, that also connects all the way back to the Edmonton Flyers
Mm.
that won the WHL championship in 1955. And indeed,
Wow.
before that, he played for the Edmonton Oil Kings in the early 50s. And I just think there's a real nice sort of link across the history of hockey in Edmonton. And he had such a stellar career, and he had one great season in Edmonton right at the end. And then his last season, he was clearly running out of juice.
Mm-hmm.
But that's he's sort of my ultra dark horse. But I'm a big WHA fan, and I like to see that aspect of the team's history get acknowledged and credited.
Yeah, well,
And
I'm the same as I think I'm a huge WHA fan,
mhm,
and I'd like to see a little bit more of that reflected
mhm.
in this Hall of Fame, and I think we will over time.
Yeah.
So
Well, by my math, we got 3 WHA guys up in the banners already because Glenn Sather got his start in Edmonton as
yeah,
a WHA Oiler, and he became coach of the
yeah,
WHA Oilers. And
Wayne,
Wayne Gretzky came
yeah,
here and played in the WHA, and he was a superstar in his one WHA season. And of course, we got Al Hamilton in there, so
yeah,
it's fairly well
yeah,
represented. But anyway, Norm, it's still going strong. I think he's 87 years old
mhm,
now. Came from Provost, Alberta, so he's got a strong connection in this province. And I think that one of the purposes of this Hall of Fame is sort of just to acknowledge and recognize that history, and that would be a kind of a unique way to do it.
yep.
As for builders, uh, put the Bill in builder. I mean, Bill Hunter
That's my vote.
is, and he's already acknowledged. Hunter the Lynx. That name didn't happen by accident, and certainly his sweater number 72 did not happen
Mm,
by accident. It's not 79, it's 72, and that's when Wild Bill came on the scene with the Oilers and put professional hockey back on the map in this town. It stayed here for 50 years
and a lot of
since he
people
did that.
don't recall. You probably do
Hmm.
that before the Oilers, he actually made a bid to bring an existing NHL team to Edmonton. It was Pittsburgh, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, he had,
Yeah.
and then he tried to bring St. Louis Blues to Saskatoon
Oh, I
at a
remember
later
that.
point.
Yeah.
And that was the year that St. Louis forewent all of their draft choices and just didn't show up at the draft. It was did not do their long-term prospects
They were
any.
owned by Purina, if I remember right.
That
And
sounds right.
it was a dog of an organization at the time, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was all of that. And the other, I don't know if he qualifies as a builder. I know he's not a player, and he definitely deserves consideration, and that would be Joey Moss. I thought he might actually get in right away in this first group, but I'm pretty sure he will be considered. They're going to honor him in some fashion, but I mean, there's a long connection between Joey and almost anybody who's ever played here, from Wayne to
no
Connor.
kidding, right? The threads cross back and forth for sure. They do.
Yeah. So I think he's. They got to figure out how they want to do that, but surely he's fondly remembered by pretty much the whole damn city.
100%. And I'll give you one more name, who I think you'd class as a builder, John Muckler.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So
coached a Stanley Cup champion in this burg,
Yeah. But the Norm Allman thing, I knew I could count on you for one of those stories. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, it's the 1954-55 Edmonton Flyers, in particular, the roster on that team is absolutely fascinating. They had Glenn Hall, Norm Ullman, Johnny Busick, all of whom are full-fledged players, members of the Hall of Fame. They had Al Arbor, who became a Stanley Cup four-time champion Stanley Cup coach, who's in the Hall of Fame. They had Keith Allen and Bud Poyle, who were the management team of the original Philadelphia Flyers. Interesting name choice there, Philly. And they also had the super scout Jerry Melnick, who was a Flyers scout that uncovered Bobby Clarke. He was on that Edmonton Flyers team. There's just famous names up and down the list, and like I say, I mean, Glenn Hall is widely recognized as one of the greatest goalies who ever played this game. He won 2 WHL championships because he was behind Terry Sawchuk in the Detroit Red Wings organization when Detroit was winning cups. Edmonton was Detroit's farm team. There were 6 NHL teams, and each of them had one goalie. I think it's tough to break in the NHL as a goalie now. You're behind one goalie, and if he was Glenn Hall or Johnny Bauer or Jacques Plante or Terry Sawchuk, it's pretty hard for anybody else to get a foot in the door.
No kidding. I had the privilege of sitting beside Glenn Hall in the press box when I covered the Flames for years, and let me tell you, that was an educational experience. He was a very wise and very giving and generous man with his time. I learned a lot about watching hockey from just sitting beside Glenn Hall and listening to him. So.
Yeah, I believe it. I took a coaching clinic that he offered many years ago when I was like a 16 or 17-year-old kid who was trying to help coach a peewee team, and my friend and I went to this, and Glenn was the keynote speaker, and he put us at ease with some ribald comment in the first 30 seconds of his and he was famous for saying what was on his mind, and whatever it happened to be, and whoever happened to be within earshot, well. So anyway, he's a wonderful story in his own right, with a fantastic career. Anyway, that history linked back to the 50s is mostly forgotten. You got a few old geezers like me that can sort of still. And that 55, I mean, that's the year I was born. I didn't see this team. I just know that they were there and that they won, and what they subsequently went on to do which has become star players, coaches, managers, scouts, executives in the sport. And so It'd be nice to kind of tie that in somehow, even though they're not
Mhm.
Oilers per se. That was pro hockey in Edmonton, even
Yeah,
before we had the Edmonton Oilers.
yeah, yeah. Great stories.
No, I think so. I think there's a wonderful history to the game, and then we got a wonderful history in this city that we should be celebrating, and which is why I'm delighted that the Oilers are doing this second um, level, shall we call it, of Hall of Fame, local Hall of Fame that doesn't have to be Hockey Hall of Fame to even be considered, which is the way
Yep.
it's been for too long. It's high time the Ryan Smiths and Lee Fogelmans and Charlie Huddies and Randy Greggs and Doug Waits uh, and on that they get their moment. I'd
I'm
like to
with you,
see
my
I'd
friend.
like to see
Yep.
the whole MGM line.
Mhm.
Get them in there.
A case will be made for the for certain members of the Oilers investors group too at some point. Case can be made
Yeah.
without them, the team wouldn't still be here,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Cal Nichols would obviously be the
Right. I was thinking of
would be
Cal in
the would
particular.
be
Yeah.
the focal point, or you could simply consider the EIG as a group.
Hmm.
Say we're just putting all 37 of you in under
Yeah.
one entry.
We should be on the panel,
It's
Bruce. We should lobby.
yeah. Well, I'm sure they're getting lots of ideas, and maybe they watch a Cult of Hockey's podcast, Kurt.
Maybe
So
so. Maybe so.
anyway, I think that's probably as good a point as any for us to wind up this chat, unless you've got something else bubbling under.
No, I think we went on ad nauseum for a while, but that's kind of fun because it's our first real opportunity, you and I, to do so in a long
Hmm.
time. So it was a hoot. I enjoyed it as always. So
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you very much, Kurt, for contributing, and we'll not sure if we'll do another one before David gets back, but we've got so many games going on this next little while that we've got our
hmm
plates full with actual hockey action, which is
yep,
really where we want to be, I think.
I'll be on call if you need me.
Right on. Okay, well, thanks for that, and thanks for listening, everyone. And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey